Hey guys, it's Arden XIII, and I am just now coming down from all of the excitement and the craziness of this past weekend with Avengers Endgame, which I saw twice, and the newest episode of Game of Thrones. And while you're here today is probably because of the title of the video. I am not CinemaSins, and I am not Generation Films. However, I need to talk about what the hell happened in that episode of Game of Thrones. More or less because I'm 24. I'm not a military man. I've never served for my country. However, I have played a fuck ton of Total War games, and I own about 7 versions of Risk. Mal can attest to this. And I just need to discuss a certain situation that occurred during the Game of Thrones episode, because did they have a plan? Because it doesn't feel like they had a plan. We had that scene in episode 2, which was interesting, and honestly, it kind of got me real excited about it, because I like seeing those top-down models where, like, battle plans and strategies are being laid out. We've got the blocks of the different units and stuff like that, facing down the blocks of the enemy units, and we're conspiring and planning about how we're going to circumvent our way around their plans, how we're going to plan around the plan that they're planning around our plan, that whole situation. However, what occurred on Sunday with that episode was nothing short of a goddamn catastrophe. Seriously, did they not have a plan? We had this entire scene discussing their plan, and it just got derailed, apparently, to the point where nobody had a plan. And so I just need to talk about this plan, and without further ado, I'm Arden XIII, and this is everything incredibly wrong with the planning and execution of the strategy seen in Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 3, The Long Night. Now, we all know the Night King is coming. We all know the Night King is coming. We all know he's bringing Viserion, zombified Viserion. We all know that this is happening. We all know that the Army of the Dead is like the biggest thing that we have been building to since Episode 1, Season 1 of Game of Thrones. However, what we were not prepared for was the utter catastrophe that was going to be this. And I understand going into this episode people were going to die, it was going to feel overwhelming, it was going to feel all the odds were stacked against our heroes, and it was just going to be a real tough sell for them to get out of this alive, and especially get out of this first round as well as they did. Major props to the production team, because it honestly was spectacular. I love the episode. However, I have to blame a lot of the things that occurred more or less on the need and build for suspense, and the how you create that sort of a mood in a show, in a piece of cinema, because there are too many minds in that room that were looking at that map going, yes, this is fine, or yeah, this is the way that we have everything set out here is gonna work, and they should have been able to say, no, this is not going to work. We should have had a better plan. We should have had a better execution to our tactics. Because there are 2 differences here that I need to talk about. There's being martially unprepared, and then there's being tactically unprepared. Martially unprepared, they were outnumbered, they were outgunned, they were essentially outmatched, because it's just a mindless horde World War Z style. In the snow, it was just all the conditions were set against them. It was at the dead of night, it was pitch black, the cloud coverage prevented hardly any light from getting through, so they really couldn't see past 100 feet of where they were standing, of where their farthest unit was standing, and I understand that those were the conditions that we were set up with, and that's really bad. But tactically, they were set up completely incorrectly, and it was honestly awe-inspiring how terribly it looked, it just from the jump. Now, don't get me wrong, I feel like I have to say this before everyone jumps in the comments and starts talking shit about me. You can go talk shit about me all you want, I don't care, but you just need to understand this. There is no reason that the Dothraki should have died that quickly. No fucking reason. I understand that the dead are ridiculous and can, like, swarm over them like a wave, but if they had used proper military tactics, they should not have died that quickly. The battle should have lasted a little bit longer, and they could have had a little bit of a better chance depending on where we were and how we set this up. I'm going to make a couple comparisons to a couple of the other battles that we've seen in the Game of Thrones series, specifically the Battle of the Bastards. That's kind of more or less on a very similar plane as what we're dealing with here, with the Battle of Winterfell. However, what the biggest difference is kind of is an allusion to the Battle of the Blackwater, where our heroes are within a castle, and they're having to defend a castle, and the enemy is coming to the castle. But in terms of military formation, we know that we had the Dothraki, we had the Unsullied, we had the Wildlings, and the Knights of the Watch. We had the Northerners, the Northern Army that had come to assist, and the final one were the Knights of the Vale that we knew were present. In terms of a setup, you have 3 tiers, essentially, that you need to create. You have your front lines, you have your defensive, and then you have your long range. Now, here's where the first tactic annoys the hell out of me. The Dothraki should not have charged first, and if they had charged first, that was only because they could cover the ground and skirmish and then retreat. The Dothraki should not have slammed into them like a wave and then just keep crashing against them. There's nothing to say that the Dothraki even ever do that. I'm pretty sure there's a battle that is talked about in the lore videos, and especially in the books, where the Dothraki came again and again like a wave against the walls of Karth, I do believe it is, but every time they pulled back. They slammed into them for a time and then pulled back. That should have been what the Dothraki were doing in terms of a skirmishing sort of situation, to start to thin the lines and also to kind of break apart the enemy forces. I understand that it's a horde and it's a herd, it's a massive wave and they can't really do anything, but every little bit helped, would have helped, especially if we're looking at the Dothraki at the end of the battle going, I don't know why you guys came over from Essos just to die in the first 10 minutes of the fight. Like, seriously, and especially with the fact that they had flaming swords thanks to Melisandre. That's huge. We know that Flame just wipes out the Whites. They should have had a much better chance to do that, and especially with Jorah on horseback with his Valyrian steel sword. He is a military-minded man. He should tactics at least. He's fought in wars before. He fought in the Greyjoy Rebellion. We know that at least, if not the War of the Usurper as well. He should have known to crash into them and draw back. Crash into them and draw back. They would have sustained less casualties, they would have dealt more damage, and they would have actually helped out as much as possible the enemy, their allies in that respect, propelling and preparing, kind of understanding and reporting back, because every time they would have crashed into them, they would have gotten a read on what the horde was doing that they could have reported back, but they didn't do that. While the Dothraki were doing this, there's this huge issue that I understand about visibility, and this is kind of what diminished the quality of the defensive, the long-range archery tier of the Winterfell defenses. They had zero visibility. Now, they could have remedied this with the trebuchets and with the catapults that had flaming balls and debris and so forth, and I understand that the Night King had his magics going that had a whole, it's too cold and the winds are too high, so the flames can't stay, lit for too long. But if we look at the Battle of the Bastards, we see that Ramsay, even though that was in broad daylight, we see that Ramsay had flayed men crucified along the battlefield. He created a hallway in the battlefield of these flaming flayed men. That is something that the Northerners could have used, at least in terms of lighting giant bonfires. I don't know why Tormund didn't suggest, hey, remember that time that Mance lit the biggest fire the North had ever seen? Why don't we try to recreate that? You have 2 fucking dragons. How is that not a play right now? They didn't care about the long range, and it's clear that they didn't care about the long range because they wanted to build the suspense and bring it into the castle, bring it into Winterfell, bring it into that stressful, close quarters, end-all, be-all fight. Are they going to live or are they going to die? That's clearly what they were going for, so they threw away all sorts of tactics. The next thing is that the trebuchet should not have been in front of the Unsullied. That's a terrible, terrible play. Nobody in their right mind, no tactician in their right mind would have done that. That's so incredibly stupid. They should have been placed behind the defenses. They kind of been in that pseudo, 2.5 tier in between the defensive line and the long-range archery line, because they could have been lobbing these flaming rocks, and even if they're not flaming rocks, they could have just been rocks, guys. Rocks could have helped thin the lines, or at least break apart the formations a little bit, just so they have something else to work with, because the Unsullied are described to be essentially the Spartan warriors of A Song of Ice and Fire. They fight in the lockstep legion sort of format. They have the shield and the spear situation going on. They should have created a phalanx, and there are pictures. I know there are memes right now about this, because I'm not the only one who feels this way about it. They were 8 deep. They should have been 8 men deep. The first line should have had shields down, spears through. Next line should have had shields in the continuing this shield wall formation with their spears up, and then every line after that should have had their spears up, just for any reason of anyone jumping or anything like that. But we didn't get that. We got them literally standing there dumbfounded. They looked dumbfounded, like, oh, we can't comprehend that this is happening. Like, I understand that this is new, this is exciting, and this is terrifying. It's a legion of undead swarm coming at you, but for the love of God, Grey Worm, you can't just stand out there and do what Sir Brienne of Tarth does, and just, hold yourself out there without a shield wall formation, sword in hand, ready to just get run down like a linebacker. Like that, you look dumb, and you set yourself up for failure. Now, the Unsullied should have kept the bulk of the middle of the column. That should have been the Unsullied, because they are meant to hold those lines. The flanks should have been the Wildlings, the Northerners, and the Men of the Night's Watch, and then the Knights of the Vale on the other side. Now, I don't know why the Knights of the Vale weren't mounted, because that's what won them the Battle of the Bastards, but sure, they're going to be on foot, and that's fine. But my biggest grievance with all 3 of these factions, all 3 of these units, is the fact that either they had shields or they didn't have shields, and they just stood there and waited to be smacked up against. That's not anywhere anywhere historically do we ever see an army doing that, because that's just welcoming the casualties. And I want to make another connection to the Battle of the Bastards. One of the biggest things that I thought was really cool was after they had entrapped Jon Snow and his whole squad of guys, including Tormund and One and all of them. To one side they had the wall of bodies, and then on the other side the Bolton soldiers had the giant tower shields and pikes, and then just started moving in on them. Where were those tower shields? Where was any shield bigger than just a buckler, it looked like? Just, the Knights of the Vale had just brought their normal-ass shields and didn't even attempt to bring anything bigger. I don't know why that wasn't even a consideration, because if they could hold back the wave, if they could even create a wall of some kind, that would have held back the dead much faster. And here's the reason why I keep talking about the shields, and why I keep talking about the skirmishing and how they needed to hold the line with a shield wall. That's just common battle tactics 101. That's Sun Tzu. That's straight from Sun Tzu. If you can hold a shield wall and hold them at bay, they're not getting through you. And if they start to break you, if they do start to break your shield wall, that's why you have more people with shields in this shield wall. It's not just the 2 front lines, it's everyone in that column. They create the strength of that shield wall, and they hold it there. But the reason why I bring this up is because if you can hold the enemy, which they should have been able to do, hold back the wave as best as they possibly could for as long as they could, Davos on the top with our long-range archer battalions should have been able to just start pelting them full of obsidian glass arrowheads. That's it. it doesn't matter. The catapults could have been doing getting anyone who's farther. They could have been getting anyone. They could have shortened the range or whatever. It doesn't really matter. All that matters is that they should have been holding them so the third tier could be providing some extra support and kind of thinning out the lines. If it was meant that they were going to break through and that was going to be the end-all be-all of it, then at least they would have been able to thin out the lines and it wouldn't have been as stressful as a time. Obviously, the entire point of the episode is stress and suspense and who is going to die, will they die, won't they? But for foregoing such common, basic battle tactics, it really just sets yourself up for failure, and it makes it almost comical, because I can't root for a side that doesn't plan. I can't root for the side that literally looks their enemy in the face and Naruto's their way to victory. There's a time and a place for that, and this is not it. I want to talk now about the dragons and the use of the dragons, especially in conjunction with the Night King. We've seen the Night King in every confrontation that he has had with anyone that he's not the one on the front lines. I think there was that one time when he was fighting, when he came for Bran, that he was, hunting for Bran, but at that point, Bran didn't have an army standing between him and the Night King. Night King has Viserion. We've seen him at Hardhome that he's gonna hang back. We saw him at season 7 episode, I do believe it was 6, the Venture Beyond the Wall. He hangs back. He sits on his horse and he waits for his enemy to break. He waits for them to be at their wits' end before he makes his move. We know he does this. They should have taken that into consideration, especially Jon, having witnessed this. Beric should have helped him out there. Anyone who was on that expedition should have known that that was going to happen. Tormund especially, and should have campaigned to understand that the Night King is not going to make his move until he feels that the enemy has been broken to the point where he can make his move. He's not going to trade lives. He's not going to risk this. He's just going to lob his grunts at people, let them die by the troves, and then walk in and clean house and finish up what he set out to do. So Dany and Jon should not have hung back with the dragons as long as they did. The moment that they saw the Dothraki getting pummeled, they should have been airborne. It's so much of we waited too long. That's what it feels like, is that they waited too long to come up with this plan, and I understand that they're strapped for time and they weren't able to get everything that they could have, but with what we even saw them having access to, they had all of the tools that they needed to at least pull off a Helm's Deep style, hold the line. That's it. Moving into the castle when all of the lines are broken, that is, in fact, a problem. However, the defensive line should have been able to hold them longer, and if they had been able to hold them longer, and if the Dothraki hadn't thrown themselves to die like lambs to the slaughter, they could have been able to, at least flank some of them, and again, skirmish. The idea of cavalry is always the skirmish. You can't just, you don't want to have the full-on, charge fight, and then they just stay there. The thing about different units in combat, and especially in warfare, is you want to make sure that they are fulfilling their roles. You want the cavalry to be able to skirmish, you want the infantry, especially the spearmen and the phalanx, to be able to hold the line, and then you want your swordsmen, your more practical swordsmen, close to hand fighters or what have you, to be able to skirmish and repel, and then you want your archers to provide support. You want your artillery to provide support, and that is not at all what was happening. A common battle tactic in those ages, and we've seen it happen, is hot oil. Where was the hot oil? Where was any of that shit? We had a trench that was, I would assume, drenched in hot oil. Otherwise, I don't know how it caught on fire, especially in the middle of winter. But that shouldn't have taken... They should have had trenches farther out. They should have had trench lines. This should have been like a World War I style trench warfare, not necessarily so the enemy could just like come into the trench or whatever, but they needed to trap them somehow. They needed to be able to thin their numbers, and there was nothing tactically, and this is going back to my whole thing about being tactically unprepared. They didn't dig trenches. They didn't set themselves up for success in this. They didn't they knew what they were dealing with. They knew they were dealing with a seemingly unending horde. Why didn't they try to narrow that down? Why didn't they do what Ramsay did and create a hallway? We've seen this done with the Spartans in Thermopylae. Why didn't the Dothraki and their horses just wait off in the wings and wait for the enemy to crash into the Unsullied and then crash into them from the sides? You can't defend your side when you're attacking from the front. And again, skirmishing and repelling. That's all you need to do. And I know that's like, oh, that's all you need to do. That's just easier said than done. I get that. I wasn't there, and I'm not going to be there. It was a fantasy setting, but when it comes down to it, there's a level of suspense that can be made and a mood that can be set. But if you show that they have all of the tools that they need to succeed and to at least like hold their own for a time before they get overrun, and you just simply don't do it, it's not good. It's honestly more irritating than it is like horrifying. Because you're looking at somebody like Tyrion, who conspired the entire plan of the Battle of the Blackwater, contributing nothing. You see Jaime, who is a seasoned warrior, contributing nothing. You see Tormund, who sieged Castle Black, contributing nothing. And even Sam, having read all of these books, contributed nothing, besides getting a few kills. Props to Sam for that. Sam the Slayer is back in town, ladies and gentlemen. But that's more or less all I have about the Battle of Winterfell. It has its issues. I do love the episode just so much, just because I also like the big scale fights. That there are bits, obviously, that just kind of rub me the wrong way, because I wish they would have done something better. I feel like they really undersold the Unsullied in this series. After Daenerys got the Unsullied and took Meereen, I think the Unsullied went down in quality, and I think that's because she was handed basically an unstoppable army, and they didn't know they didn't know what to do. They were taken down by common street thugs. And it's like, and it can be argued, oh, well, they're not used to fighting in the city. It doesn't matter when you have a really well-seasoned shield wall. There are Vikings that fought on beaches, and all they had was the shield wall, and they have taken countries. Like, it's... If you know your tactics, if you're good with your tactics, if you're seasoned with your tactics, that's all it takes. It doesn't matter the amount of odds that you are facing. If you can turn the variables and the various tools that you have at your disposal to your advantage, it's not going to give you a win, but it's going to make you better for it. It's going to make your whole situation feel a lot better. And it just didn't do that for me. Because they wanted everyone to be afraid of who was going to die. Anyway, that's basically all I got for that. I want to say rest in peace to all my folks who died. Also, I neglected to mention that this is a huge spoiler war. Oh, there should have been a huge spoiler alert at the beginning of the video. I guess I'll put that in the description as well as the title, just in case people haven't seen the episode, in which case you need to go watch the episode. We have 3 episodes left. We're finally coming for Cersei. I don't know how this is going to work out with the Golden Company. I'm interested to see how that turns out, but I'm foreseeing another battle in our future. Also, Arya was the princess who was promised. That's pretty badass. Total switch up. We had no idea. No other video that I'd ever seen had even considered Arya being the prince that was promised. But that's badass. really like what they did there. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a long, tiring, emotionally roller coaster-like weekend with all of the everything that came out with Endgame and Game of Thrones, and it's only going to continue until it's over, until this whole train ride is over. But we'll all be there together, all of us, as one big, sad puddle of a family. But I'm Arden XIII. I'm still waiting on that ramen, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.